Welcome into the Inside Scoop. We are live from Nashville, Tennessee. Today is Wednesday, October 29th, and I'm your host, Josh Newberg. Week 10 is here, and rumors are swirling about more coaching changes, and all this is affecting recruiting, so that's what we're going to talk about today, and also go behind some of the biggest visit weekends in America with experts from around the country. We got a ton to talk about on today's Inside Scoop, and I am excited about that. Also, guys, hit subscribe. If you're here and you've watched one of these shows this season, make sure you are locked in for the next 5 weeks because it's about to go crazy on the recruiting trail. So today's show, let's talk about it. We're going to go to Columbus and Ann Arbor. We got major updates on Ohio State and Michigan. We're going to talk Ole Miss. Yes, we're talking Ole Miss because they are winning and they are recruiting. Lane Kiffin, he might not go anywhere. We're going to talk all about it. Also, the state of Florida. We got a Big Three check-in with FSU, UF, and Miami. A big show. Let's get to it. Let's talk Ohio State recruiting because it's shaping up to be a pretty important weekend for the Buckeyes. And, you know, before the season started, this Nittany Lions game made it look like maybe the playoffs were going to hinge on this game, the Big Ten championship and some others. But obviously Penn State not heading in the same direction we all thought they would be. So we are going to break down a huge recruiting weekend in Columbus. Speaking of Columbus, we have Jeremy Berm. He's on his way, so luckily we got him. We're going to break down this whole big visit weekend. But first, Ohio State fans, do me a favor, hit subscribe to the Rivals Recruits channel. We love talking Ohio State recruiting, and things are starting to heat up. All right, let's bring in Jeremy Berm of Letterman Row, and you are on your way to Columbus, but we got to talk recruiting. And we'll start with two big names that are on campus. The number one running back in America, Kamon Spell, coming off this decommitment from Penn State. He's made a couple trips. Ohio State going to get their shot at him. Where do you think the Buckeyes stand heading into this visit?
You know, Josh, it's interesting. Kamon is a player that the Buckeyes hosted actually for the Texas game earlier this year, so this will be visit number 2. All the discussion about him since he reopened his recruitment has been about Notre Dame. That is understandable. He had committed to Jawan Sider, the running backs coach there at Notre Dame when he was at Penn State. But it seems like this is one of those moments for the Buckeyes where they're really trying to just stall him out a little bit to say, hey, man, like, let's take a look and see if this is really what you need to rush into. Do you need to hurry into another decision? The Buckeyes really have a two-man big board at running back in the class of 2027, and then there's everyone else. It's David Gabriel Georges, who will be at Tennessee this weekend, and it's Kamon Spell, who they're trying to just get to know, because this was not a player or a prospect that they had a long-term relationship with because he had committed to Penn State so early, but now you have the opportunity. And I think Ohio State's probably right there behind Notre Dame is in the big picture of things. I know he's got a planned visit to Oregon and others, but this is a big weekend for Carlos Lockwood and the Buckeyes because the running game at Ohio State has been a little bit underwhelming at times, and this is a weekend where they're going to have an opportunity to put some stuff on film for him.
Yeah, and, you know, with the way these top players in the 27 class are coming off the board, you never know if this is the last face-to-face visit the Buckeyes get with Spell. So very important weekend. Can't wait to hear what he has to say coming out of what should be a big Buckeye win as well. Speaking of Penn State, one of their top commitments, Kevin Brown, is going to be on campus. Really intriguing prospect. He is a mauler on the interior of the offensive line, 6'5", 280. The number 3rd ranked interior offensive lineman in America. He's a top 100 player. And Jeremy, he's been committed to Penn State since July of 2024. So Kevin Brown, all but locked into Penn State until James Franklin was fired. What's his story? Is he a possible flip target for Ohio State?
Ohio State does not like to waste its time. I think that they made sure to ask him straight up when he was having these conversations when James Franklin got fired. Hey, is this something that you're really interested in? And I think the most interesting thing about the entire thing with Kevin is that you can see it from his quotes that either Adam Gorney has gotten or Steve Wiltfong or anybody else. When I've talked to him, this is not something he truly wanted to do, but he feels like he has to. He feels like he owes it to himself. Ohio State, West Virginia are probably the only schools that are going to get those visits from him. His father played Virginia. The Buckeyes are obviously the premier program in the country in a lot of ways. And this weekend, he'll take an unofficial visit to Columbus. He'll be there for the game on Saturday. And the hope for Ohio State is that this weekend goes so well that they have him back on campus for the LA game in 2 weeks for an official visit. So that's really the goal for the Buckeyes. The longer things go unanswered in Happy Valley, the easier it is for other schools to try to pry him away. And Ohio State seems to be the team that has the best opportunity to do that. And it's not a knock on West Virginia, but Ohio State and West Virginia seem to be the only schools that really have a chance from here, and we'll see if the conversation at West Virginia can ramp up to the level it is with Ohio State. But obviously, if you compare those two schools and the programs overall, it seems like Ohio State would have the best chance to flip a kid who really has no desire to go anywhere other than the place he's been committed for 18 months.
Yeah, kind of crazy situation, but you got to look at all your options. All right. Not the only flip targets on campus. There's a couple coming in for official visits this weekend. Jeremy, who are they?
Yeah, one is Jimmy Suliafu. He's a defensive lineman from Katy, Texas, committed to North Carolina. A player that Ohio State kind of quietly offered about 3 weeks ago. He's been committed to North since the summer, and there hasn't been a lot of discussion about him anywhere really since. But 6'4", 265. Buckeyes look for another defensive end, another wrong side defensive end, maybe someone who can slide in and play three tech. Jimmy's that type of guy, having a good senior season. They like his size, they like his physicality, they like that he's physically ready for college. It's one of the real boxes that Matt Patricia and Larry Johnson are trying to check with defensive linemen. They also will be hosting Jay Timmons, the Florida State cornerback from Pittsburgh. He is a Florida State Seminole legacy. He has been talking to other schools, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, over the last couple months. And with the uncertainty in Tallahassee, it makes perfect sense for him to take a look. Again, being from Pittsburgh, it's a pretty local trip for him. It's only 2.5-hour drive to Columbus. It's a big opportunity for the Buckeyes for a player who's really moved up the ladder. Rivals has him as the number 2 ranked corner in the entire country.
Right.
So the Buckeyes, with only one commitment at corner right now from Jordan Thomas from New Jersey, it is imperative that they land at least one more and maybe two. And right now, because Danny Odom from also from Pennsylvania by way of Orlando's first academy and committed to Nebraska, was supposed to come into town this weekend. He's not. That still may happen 2 weeks from now, but it's now all hands on deck for Jay Timmons, and he will get a red carpet rollout this weekend from the Buckeyes.
All right. So despite it being a noon kick, this is kind of a loaded visit week. What other 2027 names are you tracking right now?
Yeah, I mean, Letterman Row on Wednesday morning just kind of got the confirm we were looking for about Mark Matthews, one of the highest-ranked offensive linemen in the country, St. Thomas Aquinas, 5-star. He's coming up this weekend. And a name that's kind of sneaky under the radar for Ohio State fans to pay attention to is linebacker Quentin Cipher from North Carolina. He is, from what I've been told, probably at the very top of the Ohio State wish list at linebacker in the class of 2027, and he's going to be back on campus for the first time in a year. It's an opportunity for James Laurinaitis and Matt Patricia to really show him why he's a priority for them. It's hard sometimes when you're 1,000 miles away from Columbus, you haven't been into town in a year, to feel like you're a priority, and Ohio State is going to go out of its way to make sure that Quentin Cipher knows that this weekend as well. He'll be with teammate Rashad Streets, one of the best defensive ends in the country, another 2027 from Millbrook there in Raleigh, North Carolina. So there's a large list of people. We're breaking it down myself, Mick Walker, Alex Gleitman over at Letterman Row.
All right, Jeremy Berm, we appreciate you. You guys go check out Letterman Row all weekend. I'm going to be glued. Live updates coming for what could be one of the biggest visit weekends of the season for Ohio State. So we appreciate you, Berm.
Thanks, man. See ya.
Talk Michigan recruiting because the Wolverines, they got a 7:30 p.m. kickoff versus Purdue. Could end up being a big visit weekend in Ann Arbor. We got E.J. Holland with the Wolverine. We're going to preview this one and go behind the scenes of some of the big names on campus. But before we do that, Michigan fans, we got like 5 weeks to signing day. This thing is about to go crazy. Make sure you are subscribed to the Rivals Recruits channel. We love talking Wolverine recruiting. All right, let's bring in E.J. Holland, and we're going to talk about how some of these coaching changes could impact Michigan's class, meaning they could add some guys. But first, who headlines this weekend's visits?
Yeah, definitely. I think you have to start with a flip target at one of the biggest remaining positions of need for Michigan this cycle. And we've talked about it a ton on the show here, Josh. Michigan needs another linebacker this cycle. I mean, we are already getting into November, and we've talked about it for weeks and weeks about Michigan needing another linebacker to complement Markel Dabney, who's more of a 3-star upside type of prospect. Now, they've swung for guys like Nick Abrams, who's committed to Georgia. They haven't had a ton of luck there. So they focus really in on finding senior late risers, guys with strong film this year. And they identified Aiden Reeder last week, who is committed to Wisconsin. He's another 3-star prospect, but a guy that could rise late, again, having a really strong senior season at St. Xavier in Cincinnati, which is one of the strongest high school programs in that area. Now, Michigan is the only other school that's a factor in this recruitment right now. Like I said, they offered late last week, so this one is progressing quickly. You could see Michigan maybe complete a flip in the near future if the visit goes well this weekend. So he's kind of the headliner when it comes to 2026. I wouldn't rule out maybe Michigan getting in some other visitors here. The visit list is still taking shape. This is a late kickoff, so there will be opportunity for this list to grow as Michigan tries to get some of its other remaining flip targets on campus. But Aiden Reeder certainly a big one at a position of need. And then 2027, I think the guy that everybody knows is Dakota Warrant. He is a top 100 wide receiver, in-state kid. Has been on campus before. Michigan has the lead on the Rivals recruiting prediction machine. They're trying to fight off Ohio State, Oregon, and some others, but Michigan in a strong spot there. If he makes it to campus like he's supposed to, I think that it'll give Michigan another opportunity to maybe have him see Bryce Underwood, see the development of the offense since the last time he was on campus. Obviously, Michigan didn't have the best passing game this past week, but the week before that against Washington, you saw what Bryce Underwood could be capable of and what this offense could look like. So continuing to show more balance is important for Warrant. There's a handful of other 2027 targets coming in, but I would say that Warrant's the guy in 27, Reeder's the guy in 26. Those are the two guys that are really going to be honed in on this weekend.
Yeah, and with the late start, you guys stay locked in with the Wolverine because EJ and the boys over there will have live updates as more names are confirmed, and I think we'll see more. Let's go back to last Sunday when Brian Kelly was fired from LSU. There was, it's chaos down there in the Bayou, but one thing that hasn't budged is any of their commits. They have 0 decommitments, but there's one that I'm watching. Heck, I was watching him before the Brian Kelly firing, and that's Havon Finney. He's a bit of an outsider, right? He's from Los Angeles, California, committed to LSU. Like a lot of these LSU commitments are from the state of Louisiana, but Havon Finney is not, and he's been a priority for Michigan. What's going to happen now that Brian Kelly's gone?
Yeah, I told you, Josh, a couple of weeks ago. I was like, hey, man, I don't think this Havon Finney thing is over regardless of what anybody reports. And now with Brian Kelly being shown the door, it gives that, more credence. I think that Michigan has continued to work very hard here behind the scenes, even before Kelly was fired. Like I said, they had been in contact with Finney and his family. They visited him the week they went out to LA to play against USC. They were already working on getting him on campus. And now that Kelly is gone and you could see more staff movement over at LSU, the door is wide open for Michigan to make a move. So they obviously have 2 weekends left, this weekend and the game against Ohio State around Thanksgiving. They will push to get Finney on campus in November. So again, whether it's this weekend or for that Ohio State game, if he does make it to Michigan, man, watch out. I mean, I think Michigan is the clear top contender here. If he flips anywhere other than LSU, I do think it will be Michigan. It's not like Michigan has inexperience flipping LSU commits late. They did it last cycle with Bryce Underwood. So Havon Finney, definitely a guy to know for Michigan fans.
Yeah, there's going to be some flips down the stretch. We just don't exactly know where they're coming from, but Michigan's gearing up for a run here. We know they want to add more DBs. Havon Finney, one of them, but they've been after guys like Devon Benjamin and Kerry Adams, who maybe they're long shots, EJ, but what about DB CJ Brownell, committed to the Florida Gators? They don't have a head coach. And DB Jay Timmons, number 2 corner according to Rivals, is committed to FSU. They could both be up for grabs. There's coaching uncertainty in the state of Florida. So are they rising on Michigan's recruiting board? Inside Scoop listeners, let's talk game time because the NFL season is underway, and who doesn't love to see their favorite NFL team live and in person, especially when you can go with a bunch of your buddies. But the only bad thing is tickets are never easy to find, and getting deals on those last-minute tickets can be frustrating when all you want to do is be there for the moment that your team runs out onto the field. Well, thankfully, the Game Time app gives the advantage back to the fans, and it's the hack for unlocking amazing ticket experiences, and it only takes a few simple clicks. The app's easy to use, and the Game Time guarantee means that you trust that you'll get 100% authentic tickets on time and at the best price. Plus, fees are always included, so what you see is what you pay. You can even get NFL games as low as $100. That's why I use the Game Time app. It's super simple, and it makes the experience of buying tickets a breeze. Also, one of the coolest features I've seen is the Game Time lowest price guarantee. It's where Game Time will credit you 100% of the difference to guarantee you're getting the lowest price if you find cheaper tickets elsewhere. All right, here's what we're going to do. You're going to download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code INSIDESCOOP. That's INSIDESCOOP for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. For $20 off Game Time, last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed.
Yeah, I would say Finney would be the guy, no doubt, right at the top of the board. But they really do like C.J. Brona. When Florida fired Billy Napier, I came on the show and said, look, Michigan's increasing contact. That contact has continued over the last couple of weeks. And so Michigan's looking to lock in a visit date with him. He has locked in a visit with Ohio State, which is interesting. Shows that, he is open to leaving the region as well. So Brona could pop up on campus for sure. Jay Timmons, I think that one's kind of developing here. Michigan's been in contact, and they are set to visit him during the bye week next week. He is at Ohio State this weekend, but he has a pretty open slate the rest of November, and so maybe Michigan can get him in for that game against Ohio State. So, it's interesting that both Michigan and Ohio State are looking at Brona and Timmons as they kind of waver from their initial verbal commitments. And another guy Michigan's still working on that, we need to mention for sure is Baylor commit Jamarion Vincent. He visited a couple of weeks ago. I think he's kind of been on the back of people's minds because he didn't flip right away. That flip could still happen for sure. They are continuing to have positive conversations with him. And like you said, there's some, outside shots with guys like Kari Adams, who seems pretty solid to Notre Dame, or Devon Benjamin, who's pretty solid to Oregon. But, Michigan's going to flip at least one corner before the end of this cycle. Right now, I would say the most realistic big time flip target is certainly Haven Finney, but Michigan casting a wide net and has some other really, really interesting options here as well.
All right, Michigan, they're casting a wide net for flips. They are going fishing for flips. So Michigan fans, let's hear it. Who is your favorite? Who is your top flip? Maybe it's not even somebody that EJ mentioned. Maybe it's not even a DB. It could be anybody in the country. We know what Michigan likes to do down the stretch. Who do you want to see them flip? Let us know. Comment section below. It's time for a State of Florida Big 3 check-in. We got 2 classes in jeopardy and 1 on the rise. I'll let you guys guess. Can you guess which is the program on the rise and which are the 2 programs in jeopardy of losing their recruiting classes? Well, don't have to guess too long. We're going to break down the state of Florida with national analyst Marcus Benjamin here in a second. But before we do that, guys, do me a favor real quick. Hit subscribe to the Rivals Recruits channel. This is the best recruiting channel on all of YouTube. All right, let's bring in Marcus Benjamin, national analyst here with Rivals. And we're going to start with the Canes, a program on the rise under Mario Cristobal. Yesterday, they land Milan Paris, a huge wide receiver that they brought in for an official visit over the weekend. And then news last night, the 4-star corner Blake Stewart is backing off his commitment from Clemson. And Marcus, is this one that Miami is going to pounce on?
It certainly feels that way. I know defensive coordinator Corey Heatherman loves Blake Stewart. I feel like he's probably the number one, or was the number one safety on their board. So to see a guy like him become available, I think it's just music to the Hurricane staff's ears. And Miami has been in the race for him kind of throughout. Hosted him for an official visit in June. And when I last spoke to him then, or when I did speak to him after that visit, it was Miami and Clemson as far as the top two teams. So now that Clemson is kind of out of the mix here, Miami is in the driver's seat to gain his commitment.
All right. So as we said, Mario has this program kind of right where they want it. I know they had a little slip up a couple weeks ago, but gets back on track last week against Stanford, and there's some coaching chaos all over the country. LSU comes to mind. They got a couple prospects that Miami would like to pluck off that commit list, namely five-star athlete Lamar Brown and defensive lineman Deuce Gerald's. Both Lamar Brown and Gerald's expected to star on that defensive line. So does Miami have a shot at either? Weren't they involved with Lamar Brown at one point?
Yeah, absolutely. Lamar Brown did visit for a cookout on Miami's campus over the summer. He's a prospect that Miami always had high on their radar, and the relationship has been pretty strong throughout his recruitment, especially this calendar year. So I think Miami will make a strong push for Lamar Brown. He's an outstanding talent who could play both ways at an elite level. It's really kind of where Brown wants to play, either defensive line or offensive line. So I think Miami definitely has a shot. And you've seen Miami kind of swing for a big fish like this in previous classes. Some they've hit, some they've missed, but they definitely will be pushing to flip Lamar Brown now, especially with Brian Kelly showing the exits.
Yeah, of course they are sniffing around those defensive line prospects for LSU. They always have a couple good ones committed. No surprise, Lamar Brown at the top of that list. When it comes to Miami finishing strong, we know they're going to finish strong. We know they're going to make a splash, especially if they keep winning the way that they are right now. So you got guys like a Calvin Russell, Bryce Perry-Wright, Derek Cooper, Justice Fitzpatrick. Yeah. Anybody stand out to you? Tank Jones. Anybody stand out to you? You're like, yeah, I think I'm going to pencil him in Miami's class.
Well, out of all of those that you mentioned, I feel like Miami probably has the best chance to flip maybe a Justice Fitzpatrick, just because the contact has been kind of relentless from the Hurricanes between the staff and Fitzpatrick. This is a relationship that goes way back to where Minkah Fitzpatrick was being recruited by Mario Cristobal. So Cristobal has a really long established relationship with Fitzpatrick and the family. So, and of course, staying close to home is appealing for any South Florida kid. I think most South Florida kids just want to make sure that Miami is relevant, and Miami is one of the contenders for the national championship, which they still are, despite their one loss to Louisville this season. So, Calvin Russell, it seems like he is pretty solid with taking his talents outside of South Beach or down here in South Florida, just because I believe the family kind of feels like that's a better option for him. With Derek Cooper, I feel he seems to be locked in with the Longhorns just because Texas has him as their lone running back prospect in their 2026 class, which is something that he likes. And of course, they've put in arguably probably the highest number of legitimate running backs to the NFL. That's something that Derek Cooper definitely likes. I do like Miami's chances possibly for a Tank Jones flip as well. That communication, it continues to be, consistent. And also Nolan Wilson is another guy that I definitely would look out for as well. Miami did flip Hayden Lowe late in the process last year. So I could see a Nolan Wilson also happening for Miami. But back to the LSU class, I did want to mention DeAnthony Lafayette. That's a guy that Miami's really high on. And I think the recruiting efforts is probably stronger with him than the other ones that I've mentioned. And the fact that, LSU is now searching for a new head coach definitely bodes well for the Hurricanes. But it's all basically coming down to whether Blake Baker, a former Miami defensive coordinator, by the way, stays with the LSU Tigers. I think that's kind of the key domino to fall here. If Blake Baker stays with LSU, I could see DeAnthony Lafayette definitely staying with the Tigers. But if he doesn't, then that's a guy that I would pencil in for the Hurricanes.
Yeah, and, Hurricanes have a plethora of flip targets available to them as long as they keep winning. One of the things that stands out to me, because we're doing a big 3 check-in here in the state of Florida, rivalry recruiting is huge, and you really don't see the Canes going after many targets on the FSU or Florida Gator commit list. Maybe that just, kind of speaks to where those two programs stand in recruiting right now.
Yeah, not so much the Florida Gators, but I think Miami's still kind of in contention for some of the Seminoles commits, including Jason Lopez, the 4-star wide receiver from Chaminade, Madonna down here. He's a guy that Miami still kind of has on the radar. Yeah. Yes, Miami did land a commitment from Milan Paris last night, which, definitely increases, just how good that 2026 wide receiver commit list is, but who wouldn't want the local talent or the Xavier Restrepo 2.0, as we kind of call him down here, based on his size, the number, and just just the way that he plays on the field. I think that's probably the one Florida State commit that you could probably say that Miami is still has on the radar. They are still have some communication with Tadarius Hughes as well, the safety out of Miami.
Looking around.
Yeah, definitely. He's looking at around to different programs like Nebraska and, of course, Miami. So I think those two guys from the Florida State class are definitely on Miami's radar, but not so much these guys from Florida. I do agree with you there.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the Florida Gators. Now, despite the season the Gators are having, they're sitting at 13 in the Rivals rankings, only one spot behind the Miami Hurricanes. But, Marcus, it feels like we have two programs moving in much different directions here. Miami, they are aggressive. They're out on the trail. They have flip targets. They have a ton of flip targets on that board. Whereas the Gators, it feels like they're playing a little bit more defense. And what I mean by that is take a prospect like a Carson Baker, right? Just a couple weeks ago, we thought, hey, maybe his recruitment's trending to Florida State. He's going to be there the same weekend that the Gators host Texas. But the Florida Gator coaching staff stepped in. They got Carson Baker to Gainesville that weekend instead of Florida State. It looked like they put a fire out, but now Carson Baker in Georgia Tech is starting to heat up. Carson Baker from the state of Georgia. Is Tech a real threat here to flip him?
Absolutely. I do feel like Georgia Tech is probably the biggest threat at this point. I think North Carolina and Kentucky are involved as well in this possible Gator flip, but I think Georgia Tech is definitely the leader there to flip Carson Baker, just based on what we're hearing from the visit. Here it went very well.
Yeah.
And of course, staying in the Peach State for Baker is appealing for him. A lot more stability over there in Atlanta with the program that Brent Key is building over there in Atlanta, and the Yellow Jackets are still undefeated. Definitely trending in different direction of the Florida Gators. So if I'm Baker, I'm definitely considering the Yellow Jackets over the Gators.
So another prospect that the Gators are going to have to play defense on to sign him is C.J. Bronow. The corner from Windermere was an early commitment of the Nebraska Cornhuskers before flipping that commitment to the in-state Florida Gators. But then just the other day, he tweeted that he recently received an offer from Ohio State, and it looks like things are speeding up because he has an official visit slotted for 2 weeks from now. Is C.J. Bronow going to be a tough hold for the Gators the way the season's trending?
Yeah, extremely. I feel like he's like a fish that you're trying to get in water. Like that's how slippery he is right now. I think he's been very solid with the Gators though throughout his process. He's their top rated recruit. So if the Gators lose him, they obviously fall from that 13th spot. And who knows who else would drop from the class once he does. But yeah, I like Ohio State's chances here to definitely flip him and press him on the official visit. The fact that they came in kind of late in the game should scare a lot of Gator fans, and he's impressed with just the prowess of the coaching staff producing Ohio State Buckeyes to the NFL. I think that's something that is going to play a major factor. And of course, the fact that they're the defending national champions, the number one team in the nation currently right now. I think everything bodes well for the Buckeyes to flip Brona, sooner than later.
Mm. I mean, it's kind of tough for the Gators to get aggressive on the trail when you don't have a head coach. What are top recruits saying? Like guys like KJ Ford, I mean, we mentioned CJ Brownell, but Kendall Gervil, Marquez Daniel. I mean, there's a lot of talent left on this commit list. What are recruits saying about the coaching search?
I think for the most part, they are kind of on a wait and see, type of vibe. As far as one of the commits that I've been in contact with is CJ Hester out of Cocoa, defensive back. He's kind of in that wait and see type of stance right now, and but I think every recruit on this list is really kind of looking at their options. Javari Lucas did come out and say that he's locked in with the Gators. He's the one guy that I probably bet that will stay with the Gators regardless of who they hire as head coach. But I definitely think like players like CJ Hester is looking at his options, and I think he would definitely consider another school. Just based on who ends up in Gainesville on the coaching staff. So for the most part, I think most of these crews are saying kind of the right things. Hey, we're going to stick with Florida no matter what. But I think once there's a different coaching staff and they see that maybe that coach for their position is not recruiting them as hard as another school, then I think it's inevitable that they'll likely leave the class if that happens.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see what happens with the Florida Gator commit class. So far, 0 decommitments. Why do you think we're seeing 0 decommitments at Florida, whereas with Penn State, I mean, we saw 5 or 6 immediately as soon as James Franklin got fired?
Yeah, I think it's just kind of a wait and see approach. I think it's you don't want to leave a situation if you don't have a landing spot quite yet. So I think a lot of these recruits are just kind of waiting to see which school kind of gives them the best offer, which school would be the best position for them to jump into. I think they're still really feeling a lot of schools out. I think in this day and age of college football and recruiting, there's a lot of agents involved, and agents are really kind of trying to see, which school is going to offer the best landing spot for their player client. So I think there's just a lot of talks right now kind of behind the scenes to really kind of see what the best option is. And a lot of these recruits don't want to be too hasty and jump out of a situation if their position coach at Florida is indeed retained. So I think it's really just coming down to whether their position coach is retained at Florida and if other schools are offering a better option for them. But I still expect at least 3 or 4 flips from this class.
All right, let's talk about the Florida State Seminoles and their recruiting. It's tough. FSU is in the midst of a 4-game losing streak. They're coming off a bye. They face Wake Forest at home, and the fan base has run out of patience for Mike Norvell. The administration, and not so much, at least not yet. Maybe by the end of the season, we'll see what happens. Heck, this weekend with Wake Forest coming to Tallahassee, could be the end of the Mike Norvell era. In the meantime, they're still recruiting. They're still playing defense on some of their top recruits, and Jay Timmons is one of them. Ohio State in on the 4-star defense back. Even though he's a legacy prospect for Florida State, his father played for the Seminoles, it seems like Ohio State making a big push here.
Yeah, it's similar to the CJ Broner situation. I do think how this season plays out for the Seminoles will determine a lot. Obviously, if Mike Norvell is retained, the administration did come out and say that they were waiting till the end of the season, but we all know that could change in a blink of an eye, especially if they lose to Wake Forest and say if it's an embarrassing loss at home. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they just pulled the trigger at that point and let Norvell go. It's better to make that decision early. That way you can kind of figure out how to save your current class and future classes as well. But, the Buckeyes here are pushing really hard. I think they have a really good chance. They're in a really good position. Like I said, it's really all depending if they can get him on campus and really kind of woo him and show him everything that Columbus and Ohio State has to offer. So I would say it's kind of a 50-50 chance at this point. It really kind of depends on if this staff stays intact over there in Tallahassee.
And when you look at the recruiting rankings, it's actually pretty odd. Miami's sitting at 12, Florida at 13, and Florida State at 14. But the difference between Miami at 12 and Florida State at 14 seems a lot wider than just two spots, especially with the direction that the two programs are headed. And I don't just mean on the field. I mean in recruiting. Florida State, really, it's going to be – of course they're going to add a couple more. They only have 25 commitments. They will add regardless of who their coach is. But they might not hold on to everybody they got right now. Who are some of the more coveted current commitments that teams are trying to shake out of that Florida State commit list?
Well, Xavier Tiller, the tight end, I think is a player that you definitely kind of want to watch here. This is another guy that Georgia Tech likes. I feel like Georgia Tech is kind of picking and choosing to really kind of see who they can get from the Gators and Seminoles here. So I would definitely watch him as well. I've already mentioned Jason Lopez and Darius Hughes. Darion Williams is another player that I would kind of watch. I think he's kind of watching in that wait and see approach to really kind of see where the season goes for the Seminoles. But I think Darion Williams is definitely a player that you would want to kind of watch as well. Ernest Rankings is just a player that I like, So if I was a coach, I would let's see what's going on with Ernest because he's an outstanding talent that I think has tremendous upside. But I think this list of commits for the 2026 Noles, I think it's pretty much up for grabs once there is a decision, or if Florida State makes a bowl game or not. And if they're in that situation where they lose the next couple of ACC contests, then I would expect that Darion Williams, Xavier Tiller, Jay Timmons, these guys would definitely be on the radar for a lot of programs.
Yeah, and we haven't even seen FSU make the move at head coach, which we expect them to do at some point, whether it's this weekend, whether it's more toward the end of the season or after the season. That's also going to impact recruiting. So you guys talk to us. How are you guys feeling about the state of Florida and these teams and the directions that they're headed? Talk to us about the Big Three check-in. Comment section below. Let's talk Ole Miss recruiting, because the Rebels keep winning and other teams keep losing their coaches, meaning the rumors surrounding Lane Kiffin just keep getting louder and louder. Maybe that's a good thing for Ole Miss fans because it means Ole Miss is winning. And we're going to talk with Zach Berry of OM Spirit about, we're going to hit on the rumors, but also Ole Miss recruiting is hot right now, and there are some major flip targets on campus, coming to campus. We're going to talk all about it. Before we get to that, Ole Miss fans, do me a favor real quick. Hit subscribe to the Rivals Recruits channel. This is the best recruiting channel on all of YouTube. All right, let's bring in insider Zach Barry. And Zach, just first, your thoughts on what we're hearing surrounding Lane Kiffin. I mean, you can't ignore it.
Yeah, it's hard to ignore. I've been making the joke, and it seems like everybody else is too. Like, hey, Lane Kiffin can't coach everybody. Mm-hmm. You've got Florida that wants him, LSU. That you've had some rumblings and rumors about Steve Sarkisian in the NFL. Texas would come calling. So everybody wants a piece of Lane Kiffin right now. Ole Miss is one of the hotter teams in the country, and I think it's kind of a perfect storm with how much. You're winning at this clip right now after you lose the tight one on the road to Georgia. You go on the road and handle business in Norman against Oklahoma. Now everything is in front of you where you get back home, you can run the table and finish 11-1, and then things can get very, very interesting timeline and logistics-wise for these programs that are trying to hire Lane Kiffin.
Right. And let's talk a little timeline here because what makes it all so interesting is that signing day is always that first Wednesday in December. The early one is always that first Wednesday in December. So I believe it falls on December 3rd this year. Well, December 3rd is well before the playoffs. And, Florida fans want to know, LSU fans want to know, hey, when are we going to know from Lane Kiffin whether he's coming or not? But, Zach, when will Ole Miss know? When's the window do you think Ole Miss would know for sure that they have Lane Kiffin for the long run?
Yeah, I mean, I think, honestly, I'll just to be up front before I start giving my opinion, I don't think anyone knows anything. I don't think Lane Kiffin's told anybody anything. I'm sure Jimmy Sexton is talking to people and hearing, all the overtures. I just don't think Lane has said anything. To be honest, I don't think Lane even knows. I think he is focused on this team. He is focused on getting to the college football playoff. Look, Lane is a highly, highly, highly competitive person. And he took the Ole Miss job and wanted to get Ole Miss to a national championship. Now it's 7-1. All your remaining tough games are at home, and then you travel down the road to Starkville for the finale. You have a legitimate shot at 11-1 and getting to the college football playoff. And I think that that's his main focus right now. And I know that's probably not the answer that people want. It's not juicy. But to be honest, I don't think anyone really knows. If people are out there saying, well, sources are telling me that Kiffin's saying this or this, I don't think anybody knows whether it's contract numbers or really anything that he said. I mean, people in that building are locked in. They're getting ready to play South Carolina.
Right. That's
the main focus right now. And I think that the goal is within reach to get to the playoff. And then after that, the goal to win a national championship comes later. But yeah, I don't think he's said anything. I don't think Ole Miss will have a quote answer at any point because if Ole Miss keeps winning, you're going to play well into December and well into January.
Yeah.
And he's going to be focused on trying to win a national championship. He's not going to be worried about a contract or any kind of extension. That will come later.
I kind of laugh when I asked you the question about the timeline because you're right. You are so right. Nobody knows, but I have, but you have on these site publishers like yourself from UF, from LSU, and their fan base wants to know a timeline. So they have to speculate on when it could be. But honestly, that's why Lane Kiffin pays Jimmy Sexton so much money so that when we're in week 9, week 10 of the season, he doesn't have to worry about any of this. He knows he's being handled properly, and his silence only drives up the price if there is a price for him to leave.
He said on Monday in his press conference that money was not going to be a deciding factor. And I think that's true. I mean, at this point, it's like how much more money do you want, man? Like you're getting everything you want at Ole Miss and more. That's kind of been my biggest thing about will he go to Florida? Will he go to LSU? Whatever. I don't know if you can replicate the current situation he has at Ole Miss, not just with the infrastructure, the resources with the collective and the booster support, fan support. I think it's a very unique thing that I don't think a lot of people have, where you've got your athletics director, Keith Carter, is a former basketball player at the school. And then you've got Walker Jones, who's a former football player at the school. They're all around the same age. They all seem to be on the same page, and they all want the same thing. That's going to be hard to do anywhere else. I mean, that's Scott Strickland at Florida, or whether it's, Scott Woodward at LSU, or whoever is going to be at LSU if Woodward's not there. But it's just it's been a weird, perfect storm for Ole Miss where everything has just kind of fallen into place. And I think that's just going to be hard for him to leave or turn away despite what Florida and LSU might offer him.
And I also think it's a bit of a sign of the times, right? You're seeing coaches at Indiana, Texas Tech, now Ole Miss, maybe not having to leave those places to ultimately do what they want to do, which is compete and win a national championship. And we're seeing like this new era of football changing right in front of our eyes. And whatever Lane Kiffin chooses to do, it's going to make a big mark on whether or not these other programs outside of the usual blue bloods have a shot at competing year in and year out. So, really interesting to see what happens here with Lane Kiffin. But bottom line, if he wasn't winning, if Ole Miss wasn't having success, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So it is ultimately a good thing. And we're going to shift gears here and talk a little recruiting because there's been a bunch of programs that have lost their head coaches, namely Penn State, Florida, and now LSU. So I'm going to hit on three guys that I think Ole Miss could make a flip at, and you wrote about it, actually. So let's start with Tavian Branch, Penn State commitment on that defensive line, position of priority, something Ole Miss wants to close on before the cycle's over.
Yeah, absolutely. He was pretty open when James Franklin was let go that he was still committed to Penn State, but he was going to listen to other coaching staffs, and he was going to take visits. When I initially spoke with him, he was pretty adamant that he was going to take several visits, and then you fast forward a couple weeks, and then our very own Steve Wiltfong talked to him, and he said that he will visit only Ole Miss officially, and that will be this weekend. I talked to people inside the building. They're trying to get to know him. It's been a whirlwind where he is, Ole Miss has been in contact, but he's been committed to Penn State, so he hasn't really been on campus. He hasn't really gotten to know the staff. So that's been the main thing, I think, for defensive line coach Randall Joyner is he's got to get to know him, make sure that he's a fit, and they'll want to add him to this 26 class. I think he's a fit. I think he is exactly what Ole Miss will need in the middle of that defense. Xavier Harris is going to the NFL after this year. He's having a fantastic season. You put Tavian Branch alongside guys like Cam Franklin, William Eccles, Jan Brown, all these big interior guys that are all high school guys, which I think is pretty interesting where Ole Miss has really implemented the portal a lot. And the defensive line, I mean, I think you got to tip your cap to Joyner and what Pete Golding have done up front where they've developed these guys out of high school. So Tavian Branch fits what they want in the middle. He's a super athletic dude. He's not just a big run plugger. I mean, the guy can actually really move. He's an athlete. That is one I think you need to watch closely if you're an Ole Miss fan. He will be in town this weekend. I wouldn't be shocked if he were to commit before he heads to the airport to get back to Pennsylvania.
And then it's no surprise Ole Miss is circling back on four-star defensive lineman Deuce Geralds. His dad played for Ole Miss. He's committed to LSU. That coaching vacancy is now open. Ole Miss, can they get him back on campus soon? I mean, where do they stand with Deuce Geralds? How likely is a flip there?
Yeah, that one's still kind of in flux right now. He's saying all the right things about his commitment to LSU. And look, Frank Wilson's still there. And Frank Wilson, if you're familiar with the recruiting world, you know who Frank Wilson is. You know how good he is. They're going to try to keep him. I mean, I don't know, it went out this week. I mean, Deuce Geralds is now the all-time sacks leader in the state of Georgia in high school, which is phenomenal. He's a bit of an interesting prospect where he's kind of a tweener where he's not super tall. He doesn't have a lot of length, but I mean, the guy makes plays. It's cliche, but he just finds the ball and he gets there and he makes a play. So 6'1", really physical, well put together kid too. Yeah. Really svelte for a defensive guy, an interior guy. But as far as getting him back on campus, Ole Miss is going to try. They've got these last remaining home games against South Carolina, Florida, and the Citadel before they go to Starkville for Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl. They're going to try to get him back. You mentioned his dad, Davin Geralds, played at Ole Miss back in 2008, 2009, but they're originally from Louisiana. That's where Davern Gerald is from, his dad. It's an interesting recruitment because he was, Deuce was born while he came to Ole Miss to watch his dad play. Like, he doesn't remember because he was, a baby, but, he was in the stadium. So, like, he is very familiar with the program, right. And he's been back plenty of times. And Randall Joyner, Lane Kiffin, Pete Golding are trying to do this flip here. Right now, I'm not so sure, but I know that Ole Miss is going to give it the old college try and try to get him back and see if they can flip him. I know the guys in the recruiting class are doing their best too. Guys like Anthony Davis, Jamichael Garrett, the guys that are already committed to Ole Miss are already blowing him up on the socials to try to get him to flip.
All right. And lastly, the number one player in the state of Mississippi, Jace Matthews. He's committed to Auburn. We know he's looking around because he was at LSU last week. He admitted he was sort of looking around. Obviously, the visit to LSU probably didn't go the way that Tigers coaching staff wanted it to go. So
yeah.
Does Jace Matthews' recruitment have shades of Caleb Cunningham?
Yeah, I think so. Every time I talked to Caleb throughout the recruitment, he always said it was Alabama and Ole Miss. Even when he was committed to Bama, he said Ole Miss was always there. He was always going to give him a shot. Ultimately flips, signs with Ole Miss. Now this one, a little bit different. Jace is a little bit more reserved, doesn't talk as much. But the big thing here is Ole Miss hired former wide receiver and NFL player Dante Moncrief, who is related to Jace Matthews. As soon as Dante Moncrief was hired, he was immediately talking to Jace Matthews.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was something. Also with Emmanuel Tucker, who was committed to LSU and is now flipped to Ole Miss. The communication had kind of fallen off, and Ole Miss, the staff really wasn't talking to them as much, even though they were, top targets on the board. They were committed elsewhere. Ole Miss was, kind of allocating resources elsewhere. But now I think Ole Miss has zeroed in on Jace Matthews. You see what Ole Miss is doing this year with true freshman Winston Watkins. I think they're kind of pitching him as, hey, we think that you're more than capable of coming in and making a difference year one. I think that's big. And then, again, just staying home, playing for, the flagship university in your state, as the Ole Miss staff likes to call it. And you mentioned, Josh, with these coaches all losing their job, I don't know if Hugh Freeze is still on a hot seat because of everything else going on in the coaching carousel. Auburn might not want to get in the race to find another coach. But
no, it's hot. Trust me, it's hot.
Yeah. If things were to change on the Plains, I think Jace Matthews would absolutely look around. I think he is still looking around already.
So
he was at LSU last weekend. But Ole Miss is going to come after him. I mentioned the family connection, and then George McDonald, the wide receivers coach, has still been in contact with him and have been talking to him. So Lane Kiffin's going to find 2 or 3 guys late that he will hone in on when he's not focused on winning football games, and I think Jace Matthews is one of them.
Yeah, pretty unbelievable time right now in Oxford. Ole Miss fans, talk to Zach and I. How do you feel? Just how do you feel about the season? It's got to feel great. I know there's a lot of chaos surrounding Lane Kiffin's name, but like I said earlier, if they weren't winning, you wouldn't hear about it. So talk to us. How you guys feeling? Put it in the comment section below.